Now, interesting, the set that I have, I had sent you some pictures a while back. In fact, that's how we got started on this whole idea of Roger coming and talking with us today here at Vintage Drums Talk. I had discovered an old set of beat up, really trashed North drum toms. No bass drum, but all the toms were there, and it came with what they call I guess the sled stand. Okay, it's a very uh, unique stand, one that you don't see that often. That's how we kind of
And kind
got.
of the bent metal tubing kind of thing.
It was pretty heavy tubing and all that, but this was all rusted out. And I've shown it in pictures, and I'll show them here too. But that's the set I'm working on right now. And we were talking about this with the toms, and we want to clarify this right now with Roger North himself. Roger, I told you in the video that there were, in part one, that the shells that I had discovered on the very edge, where when you take the rubber molding off, each shell had a number etched into the flat edge, okay, the bearing edge, which was not
Actually etched into it?
Yeah, actually,
Or is it written on it?
well, it was written, but you could see it was like scratched in, but not by a machine, by hand.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah.
And in part one, we showed that. And one, I just remember one of the numbers was 1966, and there were other numbers, but we were trying to figure out what the significance was. And I tell them what you told me, that you never did anything like that.
Well, if I remember correctly, that drum that you showed me had a kind of a molded front edge.
Yeah.
So what that means to me is that was one of the drums that was made in Italy. That when music technology finally got their drum production or shell production up in Italy, they were injection molding the shells
Okay.
out of some sort of high density urethane. So that the fact that edge was molded, the fiberglass drums were always kind of cut and sanded on the edge, so they weren't molded.
Okay.
So that drum was made in Italy, and I don't know what that number is.
That's something
that's
you never did. Okay,
been aware of something like that.
So now we also have a nice picture here of a mold that was used, I guess, by music technology. Can you say anything about this mold here? That where was that, in Italy?
It was somewhere in Italy. I want to say Naples or someplace like that. But one of the the technicians from music technology, a guy named Tom Myers. Tom, if you're listening to this, get a hold of me.
Yeah.
I have some questions for you.
But we'd like to know
anyway,
also,
Tom Myers went over there to kind of consult with him on that, I don't know what, the drums and everything. And I believe he took that picture of the mold and sent it to me.
So how long had you been? I'll say out of it and turned it over to MTI. Would this picture have been? Do you think, when they were doing
I'm not
this
sure.
process?
Maybe 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure.
Really? Okay.
4 maybe.
Uh-huh. So the way this went down is it just got too big for you, right? Your little shop. I don't know how little it was, but you still had your 4 guys. Maybe, I think you told me you never really had a big staff.
Guys, and when we were making the drums ourselves, my goal was always to be able to produce. I think it was like 2 sets a week, and we never came close to doing that. It kind of averaged more like 1 set a week.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit more, but because there were just so many steps involved and so much complexity for a small shop like that. So and we were getting all these orders, and it was some of the stores were getting pretty insistent about, and come on, you got to send me these things or I don't want them, and that kind of thing. So there was a lot of stress going on in that respect, which is a good thing, because you want customers, but it's also, you're trying to keep up. And, my molds at that point were not the greatest, and they were, because I didn't really know when I started how to make molds properly.
Yeah.
And so, they were damaged a little bit. There was, as you make things, that's one of the downsides of fiberglass, even though it's the poor man's plastic. It's not meant for, until you build some really, really expensive molds, it's not meant for real high production. So these things deteriorate over time, and I was at that stage where I was fighting the condition of my molds, having to do a lot of individual work on every drum that came out of them, and it was just getting harder and harder.
And you're trying to work fast, because these guys are on your back about getting these drums out, right? Right.
Jeez. And so I had to, in the course of this and that, I had a friend, a woman named Joyce Richards, who was down in Los Angeles, who I had met because I was playing in a band. I was playing with this singer named Odetta. Really, really great kind of folk era singer, and I spent a year playing with her in 1970, and I had met a bunch of people down there in Los Angeles when I was playing with her, and this woman, Joyce Richards, was working for a guy, Herb Cohen, who managed Frank Zappa and some of those big bands down there. And Joyce had gotten me in touch. She had sold a set of my drums to Richie Albright, who was a drummer for Waylon Jennings.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how we got into the country side of things, but because Richie played them for a long time. But Joyce talked to Herb about it, and I actually knew Herbie too from when I was with Odetta, because he was a friend of hers and managing her, and Herb called me up and said, "Well, listen, do you want to do something with these drums?" And I said, "Well, I actually do want to do something with these drums because it's wearing me out, And so he contacted someone he knew, Ernie Briefel, who was the president of Music Technology. And so Herb put me in touch with Ernie and kind of brokered the deal, and we went through the whole thing, and they all came up here and everything, and we eventually sorted out a contract, and I ended up licensing the patent to produce North drums to Music Technology. And to me, it seemed like a good fit, because Ernie Briefel had access to, and I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he was one of the guys that started Fives drums. He was an engineer that worked was one of the primaries in Fives drums. So there was a lot of fiberglass know-how available back there too. And so, I met him too, and we talked about all the technical details, and I did some consulting for them when they were setting up. But it basically it seemed like, okay, I don't really want to do this. I don't really want to be a drum manufacturer, and this looks like these guys have a good team put together, and a good marketing team, and a good technical side. So I just decided to offload it at that point.
Now let me ask you this: prior to MTI, what were you selling your drums for?
A good question. My goal actually at that time was for a set of 3 toms and a kick drum to be somewhere around $1,000 retail.
Okay, retail.
Yeah, I was trying to make them so that they were not hugely expensive.
Yeah, but when you were selling them through a dealer like a music store,
I was trying to keep them in the ballpark of any other drum set. which, looking back on it, that's probably another mistake I made.
Uh,
But so by the time they went through, the retail markup and everything, I wasn't getting all that much for them, like $600 or $700.
yeah.
So it was a little bit of a squeeze there too.
So now when MTI picked it up,
in retrospect, and knowing more now than I did then, I probably should have gotten a couple of partners, a partner with some capital and another partner with some good sales and business acumen, and things would have worked out maybe a little better. But that's not where I was at the time, so I didn't do that.
so now the rest is kind of history once MTI takes over, except for the fact that they were sending works. They were still sending work for you. They wanted you to still make shells, right?
Yeah, they made them back there. They had a fiberglass operation back there, and they were making them for a while. And then I don't exactly know what happened, but they had some production problems, or maybe they had some cost issues. And at one point, Ernie called me up and he said, I know you've still got your fiberglass shop. Are you interested if we finance you making a new set of molds with a new shape, which was like easier to make the molds in a single piece.
So you were using their molds. You were using their new molds?
Yeah, so they financed me building some new molds.
I see.
And I said, well, and they said, we're going to tool up to make these things in Italy, but in the meantime, we've got all these orders, and would you be able to make some drums for us? So it's just the shells, and leave all the rest of the stuff to us, which I said, well, yeah, I can do that. So at that point, I didn't have any employees, so I hired some guys back, Kerry being one of them, and I don't think Ken did it at that point. I think I had some different guys, but Kerry was one of the guys I hired back. And so we made shells for a while, maybe a year even, just the shells. And we made quite a few. We made, again, the goal was to make 2 sets a day, and I don't think we accomplished that.
Even with their new molds?
We made more than a set a day, of shells. So
yeah, so their new molds didn't really speed up the process at all?
Oh, yeah, they did. But what really sped it up was I didn't have to do all the hardware and assembling and all the other junk. So, but again, I didn't make as much money on shipping them the raw shells either. So it worked out. It was acceptable, but it wasn't great, and it was just a temporary thing.
So now, after that, they started putting out catalogs, because you never really did any of that cataloging.
Well, they were already putting catalogs out by that time. When MTI took it over, they did all the marketing and made a nice catalog and did some nice photos, and they did it. They were a marketing company, so they handled all the dealings with this different stores that wanted drums, and taking them to the NAMM show, showing them there. They had actually, when they first got the license to make the drums, and they were starting to make them, they brought me out to the NAMM show to kind of introduce them when we first introduced them, to the broader market, and I kind of helped them man the booth, and it was kind of cool. Different people came around. Billy Cobham was kind of involved in helping them popularize the drums, because he already had them. And I remember one time the Ludwig guys, or what was Ludwig? Maybe it was Slingerland guys came by with Buddy Rich in tow, and Buddy came up and talked to me a little bit, and he said, "Oh yeah, very interesting, very interesting." Then he looks at me in the eye and he says, but it's all in the wrist.
It's all in the wrist.
and I said back to him, yeah, it's all in the wrist, but you got to be able to hear it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was my one moment meeting Buddy Rich.
Buddy Rich. what a story from beginning to end here. And I know that with MTI, they continued on for when did they finally stop? Mid '80s or?
I don't know exactly. It just kind of faded out.
And I wonder what happened. That would be interesting to know that why a concept like that didn't stay around. What, I don't know if it was price or.
I sort of know what I know conceptually what happened, and what it is it took these kinds of things don't last a long time. A big new thing on the market, makes a big splash, and that's what these drums did. That visually they made a big splash, and sound wise too, and you kind of have to catch that wave,
Right,
and
right.
It took too long for me and for MTI to really be able to meet the demand, and then things moved on. Actually, what happened in the drum world at that time was electronic drums came in really big.
Simmons was the earliest that I knew of, along with the early disco
that kind of
sounds.
became the hot new thing, and so it kind of we were a little bit out of sync because of the difficulty of tooling up to make the drums in a
well, during that era,
in a way that we could meet the demand, So
weren't there other companies trying to copy a bit of the North concepts, such as staccato and?
Yeah, there. I think they were in England, and they made a similar
idea.
I kind of call it a knockoff. In some ways, it was, I've never seen a set in person, but I've looked at pictures of them, and their drums actually were, they've got a different shape factor. Obviously, they've got this funny little
the double
opening
bass
on the front, which probably made them feel they could get around the patent, but also their drums were actually not finished on the inside. They were rough on the inside, which I never wanted to do. I always felt like the inside part was, like, in some ways the most visible part of the drum, and so I wanted that to be finished too. And so that actually made them a lot harder to make and a lot more expensive to make.
But I just wonder, was there anything sonically different about their idea than yours?
I really don't think so. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Okay. I think they were just
not significantly.
They were boarding the wagon and riding the wave, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
So now we've got Roger North making shells for MTI for a little while, and how did that association finally sever completely? Well,
it just, they basically stopped making drums. They stopped making them and selling them, and I'm not privy to exactly what happened, but I expect what happened is that they weren't able to sell them anymore. I mean, the time for those drums had come and gone. Because I'm sure if they had a good market for them, they would have kept making them. So
well, there's a reason for everything, and we know that. But as for Roger North, Roger, you continued on, and let's bring it up to date here. We all know the impact that you had on the drum manufacturing, American drum manufacturing. You definitely have your place in that history. And it's I consider you to be a mogul and a real trendsetter, an innovative and inventive name in the world of vintage drums now because of this fantastic idea of horn-shaped North drums. But now that doesn't mean you're not playing anymore. You still continue on over there in Portland. What's your new band, or how long have you been with? It's the Freak Mountain Ramblers.
Yeah, I'm playing in a band now, and it's been 15 years I've been playing with this band.
Uh-huh.
In the meantime, I mean, I got out of the fiberglass business in probably, I don't know, early 80s, maybe. I can't remember. Well, let's see. It would have been 1983 or so. And, I just figured I needed to do something else and didn't want to be a small business owner anymore. Yeah. And so I went back to computer school and got into the information technology field, and I started out as a computer programmer, and then just got into the basic, the technical computer stuff, and actually made a career out of it for 20 years, and now I'm retired.
But
I'm still playing in the band.
Yeah. Well, how does it feel when I tell you that, whether you know it or not, your name is a big deal in the vintage drum community? When I say, North Drums, ears perk up. There's a whole group that is following North Drums and finding parts and collecting them, and they have clubs. And did you ever think that they would end up being this iconic American instrument is in the whole history of percussion?
I always knew they were different. There was nothing like them, So I was always aware that there were like a significant change. I guess the funniest part to me now is it used to be I would take my drums out and play them, and people would come up and go, "God, what? I've never seen anything like that in my life. That is amazing," And then there became a period where people would come in and say, "Oh, I remember those. My dad had a set of those," So they went from being like the big new thing to being vintage, like collectibles.
And that's why we're here tonight.
And now, actually, what I've noticed is just the last year or two, people are coming up again and saying, "I've never seen those things before. What are they?"
I'm telling you, Roger, within the vintage realm.
It's funny. And you asked me how it feels, and I have to say it feels good having built something like that. And, made something different. And I know my son, Ty North, who is a really good bass player in his own right. He's spent a lot of time playing in a band called Leftover Salmon. He's a bass player. He is very. It means a lot to him, that sort of the name, the North. It's actually, he plays with people that are kind of like saying, "You're Roger North's son. That's really cool," And it's in some ways it's been good for him too. He gets satisfaction out of that.
And to you, it's just something that
he played in this band called Leftover Salmon for 10 years, and they played with lots of people. He's done things with Bela Fleck and a bunch of different really high end musicians.
Oh,
He's a great player. So he's really respectful of it, and that makes me feel good too, And so I actually made a really cool set of North drums for him when he was like 5 or 6 years old. And they're all different colors. They're like I think the kick drum is green.
Don't we have a picture
on the outside,
of that?
Yellow on the inside, and there's a purple one. And they're like kids' colors. But he's still got those drums, and now he's given them to his son, my grandson. So
the legacy lives on.
Cool. They're one of a kind.
Well, Roger North, you have certainly made your impact on the vintage drum community, and I got to tell you that it's been an absolute pleasure, my honor, to be able to sit here and talk casually with you, because I don't believe too many people have done that. And I think the vintage drum community is going to really appreciate watching our interviews here, or I hope they'll watch all the 5 or 6 segments that we're going to do here. And I must say that I admire you as an innovator in American drum manufacturing. Roger North, it's been a pleasure. And
all right. Well, Jim, I just want to say that I appreciate all the work you've done too, and I don't say that lightly. I really appreciate what you've done.
It's my passion in life, and you had your passion, and you made your dream come true, and that dream still lives on because those drums, those North drums, with their highly recognizable shape, are sought after in the vintage drum community now, and they're going to live on. Thanks to Roger North. Roger, I bid you adieu. Thank you very much for sitting here and talking with me. The whole vintage drum community appreciates it.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim.
Take care. Folks, check back to the interviews page often because we're going to be talking to others just like Roger North. This is the place you want to be, VintageDrumsTalk.com. Jim Messina saying good night. Take care, folks. See you again.